The night was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your bones and makes every breath feel heavy. Mark had just finished his late shift at the construction site and was walking home through the quiet streets when he noticed a woman sitting on a bench with a little girl beside her. The child's head rested on her mother's lap, wrapped in a thin blanket that did little against the wind. Mark hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should approach, but something in the woman's eyes, fear, exhaustion, and silent hope, pulled him closer. "Are you both okay?" he asked softly. The woman looked up, startled. For a second, she seemed ready to lie, but then her lips trembled. "We're fine," she whispered, though her shivering hands told another story. The little girl stirred, murmuring, "Mom, I'm cold." Mark's heart clenched. He looked around, everything was dark and empty. "There's a cafe around the corner," he said gently. "Come on, let's get you both warm." She hesitated but finally nodded, clutching her daughter's hand tightly. Inside the cafe, warmth enveloped them. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. The woman, her name was Sarah, kept glancing around nervously as if she feared being asked to leave. Mark ordered soup and hot chocolate without asking. "You don't have to," she began, but he smiled. "It's okay. Just eat." Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched her daughter sip the drink with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. When the child drifted off to sleep on the seat, Sarah finally spoke. "We were evicted 2 weeks ago," she said, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "I lost my job, and I've been trying to find something, anything. But every shelter is full." Mark listened quietly, the weight of her words sinking deep. He thought of his own struggles, the nights he had slept in his truck years ago when life had fallen apart. He understood that feeling of being invisible. "You can't stay out there tonight," Mark said finally. Sarah shook her head, her eyes full of fear. "We don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly would make it hurt more. For a long moment, Mark said nothing. Then he took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "You do now," he said firmly. "Come stay at my place. It's small, but it's warm, and safe." She froze, uncertain whether to believe him. The kindness in his voice broke her hesitation. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why are you helping us?" Mark smiled sadly. "Because someone once did the same for me. And I promised I'd never walk past someone who needed help." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from fear, they were from hope. She nodded slowly, and they gathered their few belongings, a worn-out bag, a blanket, and a stuffed toy missing an ear. The walk to Mark's apartment was silent except for the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. When they arrived, Sarah gasped. It wasn't much, just a small, tidy space, but to her, it looked like heaven. He gave them his bed and took the couch. "You don't have to do this," she murmured again. "I know," he said, pulling a blanket over his shoulders. "But I want to." For the first time in weeks, Sarah and her daughter slept without fear. The next morning, the smell of breakfast filled the air. Sarah woke up to the sound of laughter, her daughter giggling as Mark flipped pancakes with exaggerated seriousness. "He's funny, Mommy," the girl said with a grin. Sarah smiled, a sound she hadn't heard from her daughter in days, warming her heart. For a moment, it felt like home. She offered to leave after breakfast, but Mark shook his head. "Stay until you find a place," he insisted. Days turned into a week. Mark helped Sarah look for jobs, even printing resumes for her. When she got an interview, he watched her daughter, teaching her how to draw cartoons. Slowly, the tension in Sarah's shoulders began to fade. The light returned to her eyes. She was still scared of the future, but now she wasn't alone. Mark never asked for anything in return. He just showed up, every day, with patience, kindness, and quiet support. One evening, as the three of them shared dinner, Sarah whispered, "You saved us." Mark smiled and shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I just opened the door." But deep down, he knew that night had changed him too. The silence of loneliness that had once filled his apartment was gone, replaced by laughter and warmth. It reminded him of something he had long forgotten, the feeling of family. As weeks passed, Sarah found a steady job at a nearby diner. She began saving every little bit she could. Mark helped her find an affordable apartment close to her work. Moving day came faster than either of them expected. The apartment was small, but it was hers. When she turned to thank him, Mark simply said, "You don't owe me anything, just promise to do the same for someone else someday." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Before she left, Sarah's daughter ran to Mark and handed him the stuffed toy he had mended one night. "So you don't forget us," she said shyly. He knelt down, his throat tight. "I won't," he promised. The door closed softly behind them, and though his apartment was quiet again, it no longer felt empty. He looked at the toy and smiled. It wasn't the end of their story, just a new beginning for both of them. Months later, Sarah visited with her daughter. They were both smiling, healthier, stronger. She handed Mark a small envelope. It was a handwritten letter. "We wanted you to know," she said, "you changed our lives." Inside was a photo of the two of them in their new home, framed by sunlight. Mark felt his eyes sting. "Looks like you found your place," he said softly. "Because you showed us kindness when no one else did," Sarah replied. That night, as Mark looked out his window, he thought about how one simple act, one moment of compassion, had rippled into something life-changing. He didn't have much in life, but what he had shared. And somehow, that made his own burdens lighter. It wasn't about saving anyone, it was about reminding people that they're seen, that they matter. And in that, he found peace. Weeks later, Mark walked past the same bench where he had first seen them. A new family sat there, clearly struggling. He paused, then smiled faintly. He knew what to do. "Hey," he said gently, "are you both okay?" The woman looked up, eyes wide and uncertain. Mark extended his hand and said the same words that had once changed two lives, and his own. "You do now. Subscribe to this channel and like it, thank you."